picked a part from sort of the middle-ish of the book, which I felt kind of stood okay on its own. So, I mean, it's hard for me to pick out a piece of this since I spent so much time looking at this as a complete narrative. But I mean, so context is just that they're on a boat and there are talking animals. So I mean, I don't know if there's more that we need for that, but Ripple and I talked for a while longer about the war and the deeper and what she knew of the other tribes. But finally, time took its toll, and Ripple and I agreed that maybe we should give sleep a chance. I snuffed out the majority of the candles which had lit the hole and proceeded to snuggle up on the top bunk. I couldn't sleep. Maybe I was still too wired from my conversation. Maybe finally slowing down had given me the chance to think about Mulder more. Maybe I just didn't like boats. Whatever the case, I spent what felt like forever just lying there, my stomach turning with the rhythmic movement of the ship. Every time there was so much as a creak from the boat, I found myself springing upright and grabbing my staff, gazing around wildly. It got to the point where an irritated audience decided to go sleep on another bunk instead, evidently tired of being woken up every minute or so by me. It felt like I was playing some game of hide and seek, except if it found me, I'd probably die. The hours ticked by and I slid in and out of sleep. After waking up from yet another nightmare, I gave up on sleeping and decided to take a walk. I slid out of the bunk, careful not to disturb my roommate, and pulled on my hoodie. As I headed towards the stairs, I eyed the still lit candles. While light would be nice, I would probably burn the ship down or get hot wax on myself. I really did miss my fellow. After a moment of hesitation, I decided to go up without it. I reached the deck of the ship, which was bathed in moonlight. For a moment, I was entranced by the beautiful scene before me, a dark forest in the distance, chirping with the sounds of midnight, a boat cutting through the river, which was still enough to reflect the gorgeous stars dotting the sky. Now, for the first time, I wondered if the constellations here were the same as at home. Wait, I took a step backwards, alarmed as I realized something which really should have been a red flag. The deck was apparently empty. It was at that point that I was jumped by the bear. What are you doing up at this time of night? Magda grasped as she slammed me into a wall. Sneaking around? I had too many questions to formulate a response. Instead, I slammed her away with my staff, hitting her again as she staggered backwards. Yelling loudly, I rushed the off-balance bear and slammed her so that she tumbled off the edge of the boat. Bears can swim, right? I murmured to myself.
Cringe so hard. It's like, well, why did I write that? That's where we're at right now. Yeah.
So, like, you wrote your book 2 years ago, so, like, when you go back now, and you feel like how, and then it's maybe, like, just have this, like, kind of, a difference behind,
Yeah.
like, improving, like,
Yeah. So I wrote my first edition of Denial, so this is Denial. I wrote my first edition in November 2013. Yeah. So that was NaNoWriMo. That was in Mrs. Schultz's class. Shout out. So I wrote that pretty hastily because you have to write it in a month, and then you have to publish by June. And so that was my junior year, so I was super busy. I didn't really have time to like perfect it the way I wanted it to be. So I figured like, okay, as long as I publish it, get it out, like that's fine. I'll just write a second edition. That'll make the one that I'm really like public. The first and second editions are wildly different. The problem with NaNoWriMo is that sometimes you'll find yourself writing, because I wrote 1,000 words a day because you have to write 30,000. Sometimes you'll just write and you'll look back and be like these aren't even real words. Like I'm just writing fluff. So sometimes like going back, it's like you're taking out huge chunks of content that are so crappy, and you're just like, okay, I'm really glad this is not in any book that anyone's reading. So I completely changed the ending, completely changed like 3 twists in the middle, changed a lot of the writing. Just as I've improved as a writer since my junior year of high school, I look back at my first edition and I cringe even harder than I do now. So that's how I've pretty much improved. Yeah.
Why is your book called Denial?
So this is definitely like one of the biggest like struggles I deal with, because people are like, "What's your book about?" And it's like I have a back like a little excerpt, but it's such like there's so many spoilers. Like I can't even explain it because I follow a girl throughout her life, so it's like I can't even tell you about the middle of the book about you finding out things in the beginning that you shouldn't know. Like, you know what I mean? But essentially, Ellie, the main character, she experiences a level of denial at some point in her life, and it is so debilitating that it does block her from seeing like a truth in someone else. And then going along with that, if you, so I don't have any copies here because I can't order for Amazon. I have to order for my publisher site. So they're gonna come in on time. So I'm gonna have a pre-order sheet up here. If you want to write your name down, I can only accept cash and checks because I don't have a machine. But like, that I'm gonna be sending the books to the school if you guys do want a book, because I can't give any spoilers.
Can I add on to
Yeah.
that? I've had that happen where somebody, so what's your book about? And there's that kind of moment where you freeze and you're like, well, because especially like looking at the back of my book, it doesn't feel like it reflects everything that happens inside of it, and it feels really hard sometimes to encompass what you wrote into. Because the whole one was that you wrote the book, you didn't write the two. It's just I find it really hard because I feel like some things can sound really different. You can word things really differently, and you can make one book sound with with one version of it, you can make it sound like a kid's book. With another version, you can make it sound like a dark, gritty crime book. Like I feel like that it's like with trailers, you can cut them differently.
Yeah.
But it's like I find it really hard to describe it.
Yeah, Ms. Schultz.
Craig, I wanted to ask you, how did you know you were writing a trilogy? I mean, is that something that you planned, or is that something that's developed as you've gone through?
So this story was sort of so it's based off writing I did in 4th grade. This is based off something I did in 4th grade, where I wrote a series called The Valley Chronicles with like the same characters, but drastically different and obviously incredibly different since I was a 4th grader. And then what happened was I had a plan for that, and I looked at that, and coming back to it now with the intent to try and make it into an actual thing, it was sort of looking at what the ideas I had planned out. I had 4 series of sort of the shortest stories you write when you're in elementary school.
Sure.
And one of them was like this completely nonsensical time travel thing, so I just cut that out. And then I had 3 basic sections, which I divided into 3 books. The regular one, Quest, and Intelligence.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, funny story. I remember starting NaNoWriMo, and I was like, what the heck am I going to do? Like, I don't have any book ideas. I only write nonfiction. I only write poetry. Like, I'll just write about my life. And so at that point in my life, I was best friends with this boy, Matt, and Miss Schultz is always going to make fun of me for this. Miss Hobbs is too. There's Miss Hobbs. I was like best friends with this boy, Matt, and I was like so incredibly friend-zoned by him, but I was like, I'm gonna write this book. It's like gonna be about me and Matt. It's gonna be great. It's just not even close to like me and Matt, because I started writing this book, and then I was like, okay, maybe I should write an outline. Like, let's write an outline. So I wrote an outline, and then I showed it to my friend. She was like, yeah, but like, what if you included this like incredibly crazy twist? And then slowly I started realizing, I was like, dude, this has nothing to do with my life anymore, and that was a really good thing. Because that would have been super weird. If I was just like, I mean, we ended up dating for like 2 years, but what if we hadn't? And I was just like, oh, I wrote a book about you. Like, that's so weird. But so that's basically where it started. And I've like always been really writing away, people were like, what are you doing? Like, I'm about to write a novel for a class, like, just leave me alone. But I remember, like, people would look over and they'd give me, like, such creative little sparks that I could go off of. And I remember Jordy 22, I don't know if anyone knows her. And then I had friends at writing camp. And some of them would just give me, like, really incredible, like, insights that I could just, like, run off of. So I would say definitely it stemmed from a really odd area that I can't believe I just shared with everyone. But, and then went definitely many different directions, not at all one time. That's a really cool question. Yeah.
I mean, the first draft, there was no such deep meaning. The first draft was just kind of having a plot there for me, but then I feel like in subsequent drafts, when I went back over it, I went in and tried to make it a little bit, and saw like the potential for something like the future, and then I started adding that in. I will say that my book isn't very subtle, just because it tends to have, its magic in it, and the villains in it, their names, they literally name themselves after negative, well, like jealousy and stuff, so it's not subtle at all. But I think that, and it started off as being extremely not subtle, but then as you go on, you find places where you're like, the way these characters did this is actually, it's different than how I would have thought, and that it can be something better.
I would say for me, definitely, when I'm writing fiction, I just kind of write, and then if the symbols like come, they come, and then sometimes I'll go off of it. But when I do write poetry, I definitely do focus more on symbolism, because poetry is pretty much encapsulated in symbolism. But I won't drive myself crazy with it. I'm not going to say, oh, this word fits here because it's symbolic. You know, if something sounds right, it sounds right. Yeah, back there.
Whenever I write, I have trouble like coming up with characters. So, what's your process for that?
Basing off people.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I do. And then talking about UK ideas like for 1,000 words a day. I always, if I see like journalism stack when I would write like short stories and poems and everything, I would capture every single mannerism. I would see like every single weird thing I saw somebody do just to make everything more authentic. I don't remember where this came from. It was like everybody around you is like a player in your play or something. I don't know. But these people around you, they're the best besides you. They're the best view into the real world.
For me, I think that coming up with characters is, I think that there are two ways you can sort of approach coming up with something like this, and I think that you can either come at it sort of plot slash, well actually three I guess, plot first, setting first, or character first, kind of, if that makes sense. And I think that the thing is, it's just you look at what you have and what you want there, and you think, what would play the best off other things. And because I mean, with this, it started off with, back in 4th grade, they gave us paintings to base our writings off of. So I started off with the setting, and from there, it's just sort of, you think about what you think would generate the most conflict or the most interest. Who do you think would play the best off other things? It's sort of about interaction. Anna?
This is mostly for you. I don't know if it applies to you, but how do you deal with killing off your characters?
I mean, I come up with, I have a beginning and an end for them. And if their end happens to be within the book, then I kill them. I feel with that. They ran their course. I say with them, and their happiness is sort of relevant. If you want to watch that, just turn on Playhouse Disney. And watch.
No, I would definitely agree with that. Like if you do start out with an outline and you have a destiny for a character, there's almost like zero emotion know that their ending is going to be like in the beginning. Whereas if you're reading a book and the character dies, you've been blindsided. But we're not blindsided.
You're always playing the Jewish rules.
Any questions? Yeah.
These two questions kind of go hand in hand. What are your favorite books and what authors have inspired you?
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is my favorite book. And I guess my favorite author, it's more like a favorite writer, is Ed. So I would say.
That's clear.
I would say that, like, as basic as it gets, like, I love Nicholas Sparks, I love John Green, like, The Fault in Our Stars, like, that book wrecked me, it was amazing. Then I'm also, like, I love a good classic, like, I like Hemingway, like, if anyone's in 12 AP, read the books, right, Miss Mitchell, like, shout out, like, those are some great books. And then I also love, like, Richard Sykin, who's a poet. His poetry is just nuts. Like, he's in my dedication. Like, he's God.
I mean, I think that I tend to like books which gain enough popularity to kind of keep going for, like, not so long that they get really, really bad, but books that go on enough that you can see the characters, like, interact. Because I get really attached to characters, ironically. And I want to see, like, what happens to them and stuff. So, and I get really immersed in worlds, and I like to see that improve. So I like things like Percy Jackson, and I mean Warriors, and comics where it's like it's just going on and on and on. Maybe too long sometimes, but I mean, it's still nice to have that to come back to. Like, you can always be like, oh, I know Rick Riordan probably has another book about some random pantheism gods, and I can look at it.
Yeah, where do you find the motivation to actually finish writing something?
It just goes back to an outline for me. If I know there's an ending, I gotta finish it.
People get mad at me if I don't get back to their responsibilities. So that's kind of my motivation.
My self-worth is tied to finishing my books. I kind of have to at a certain point do it, otherwise it's like, what am I doing? Like, why am I here? I'm just going to classes, and I'm just doing the best I can, and I'm like, that's it. Like, what else is there?
Thank you.
Yeah, Michelle,
May I do an advertisement?
please do.
Okay, so all of you who need to write, which a lot of you do need to write, sign up for the this year defunct advanced composition class. If enough people sign up for it, it will run. It's 140M. It looks terrible in the guidebook, the book that you guys will get, like the whatever the student pick your book or pick your classes book. It looks horrible. It is not.
No, it's great.
It looks horrible, but it's really, really good. And we have the Writers Guild after school on Thursdays, which is just a time if you want to come in for creative writing. Paige Kane is kind of heading that. And also the literary magazine meets on Thursdays, and if you need one to submit to it, those of you in NEHS and Mrs. Mitchell, I think you said it's a half credit per entry up to 2 credits, so that's 4 entries anytime during the school year. It'd be great. Thank you.
Sign up for advanced comp and seriously change my life. Like, I wouldn't have written this book without that class.
I mean, it's like Ms. Schultz says in the catalog,
It looks
they
horrible.
try and make it sound like it's one of the other classes, like, oh, take the tests, do it, but it's not. It's absolutely more about learning and being in a community of people and being able to write sometimes really, really weird things.
Yeah.
But really weird things. But you have the chance to.
Possible growth.
Yeah, you have the chance to put things out there and to really understand like what you're capable of.
there isn't another class in high school that you learn more about yourself than there.
Thanks. Sign up for it, people.
Okay, if anyone wants to buy my book, self-promo, haha, come and if you write your email down, I will pre-order for you.
Craig?
I guess you, I mean, I have books with me if anyone's interested, and I have, somebody did a little, Gabby Stratman did a little mini comic for me. Oh, I also sort of did a mini cover, so I'm giving everyone credit. But Gabby Stratman, did a mini comic for me, which I'll also be giving out to the people who buy the book today.
Thank you, everyone. This was a lot of fun.